1986, about 100 million children were born in the developing world. At least 55% of them were never fully vaccinated. An estimated 3.5 million will die before their 5th birthday, and an equal number will be disabled. They will be the victims of one of the 6 major vaccine-preventable diseases: measles, pertussis, tetanus, diphtheria, tuberculosis, or polio. The sad fact is that virtually all these deaths can be prevented. Safe, effective, inexpensive vaccines exist for all these diseases. In 1974, the World Health Organization, known as WHO, launched its expanded program of immunization. At that time, less than 5% of the children in the developing countries were fully immunized. Through the expanded program of immunization, WHO's member countries have made remarkable progress in the last decade, but much remains to be done. Recognizing the need, WHO member countries have now set the goal of immunizing all the children of the world by the year 1990.
To their potential.
Michael McQuestion, supervisor of the Polio Plus program, tells Rotarians at a weekly meeting how Polio Plus came to be.
Well, about 1984, Rotary International approached the World Health Community, the international health community, and asked, what could we do? What could Rotary do to help out in this drive to immunize the world's children? And the experts thought about it, and they came back and advised Rotary to go for 2 big aims. 1, to unlock private sector resources in the developing world for the task of accelerating immunization programs. 2, to try and focus on a very dramatic and breathtaking goal, which is the eradication of poliomyelitis. Rotary had been involved in immunization programs for the last decade, at least. But there was such a focus of interest on polio that we created the Polio 2005 program. As time went on, we realized that we couldn't just talk about polio, we had to talk about all these 6 diseases. And so the name was changed to Polio Plus, plus meaning the other 5 diseases. I really feel that the task is twofold. 1 is to get the vaccine out to the children, but 2 is to develop the consciousness, the awareness, the demand for immunization among all the societies of the world. Those in the developing countries have to know that those children must be immunized before they're 1 year old. Those in the developed world have to understand that it's in our interest as well to see all these children are immunized. I don't know if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask at this point. Yes, please.
Will Rotary International provide vaccines for other diseases other than polio?
No, we're not. We're not purchasing any other vaccines. We're buying only polio vaccine, and we're providing it through UNICEF primarily to the governments. That way we don't have to give money to governments and then worry about controlling it.
I wonder, is it all worthwhile? If we succeed with Polio Plus, we will save the lives of more than 3 million children. These are children in very poor countries. Many of them will probably die from starvation. For most of them, there's practically no hope.
Well, that sounds a little scary, but I don't think that's true. I think that on the whole, the third world is developing. I think that these countries are becoming more and more sophisticated. They're developing the ability to bring immunization to their children, and that's how we're showing a private sector input.
How do we know that we can eradicate polio?
I guess the honest answer is that we don't know for sure, but we have pretty strong evidence that we can do it. We have very powerful vaccines, 2 of them, and they're very low cost and they're highly efficacious. We can apply them anywhere just about with just a little cold chain. But there's another interesting precedent, and that is smallpox. Smallpox is another viral disease which was eradicated. And what did it involve? It involved exactly what we're looking at today, a tremendous teamwork approach to vaccinate entire countries involving private sector, public sector, all the international development agencies, all of them pooled their resources in the 1970s, and they wiped out smallpox. WHO declared smallpox eradicated in 1978.
I have heard that in some countries, Rotary is working with other organizations. Isn't Polio Plus exclusively a Rotary program?
It is a Rotary program, and it's perceived as such. But it is such a big task to immunize the world's children. However, what we're doing by joining this consortium, this team in each country, which includes UNICEF, World Health Organization, Ministry of Health, and other government agencies, our own USAID in the US here, and other agencies. There are dozens, literally dozens of agencies involved. Our domain is one that no other seems to be able to unlock, and that is the private sector. We're bringing the private sector into the team in a way that no government could ever do.
How can we be sure in our own minds that these governments will continue to exercise the immunization program after our grants cease?
Good question. Most countries, we feel, are going to meet the recurrent cost of immunization starting around 1990 and on. We feel that governments are realizing the high priority of immunization, and they're allocating their budgets accordingly. The other side of that is that we are educating people to demand vaccination. And when the people demand it, the governments have to give it.
I read somewhere in the literature that for Polio Plus that in Central America, I believe it was, that there were actually combat going on, and somehow they arranged these combatants to lay down their arms long enough for Polio Plus to be administered. Is that fact?
That's fact. That happened in 1985 in San Miguel, El Salvador, one of the areas where the guerrillas control a lot of the countryside. The vaccination days were announced by the government, and the guerrillas agreed beforehand that they would respect the vaccination days. There would be a truce, although it was never officially negotiated. At the moment of the vaccination day, the government workers were a little reluctant to cross the lines into the guerrilla areas. So the Rotarians stepped in and said, "We'll do it." And they did it. And they were joined by Red Cross in other parts of El Salvador. That was worldwide news when that happened.
The estimated cost of purchasing the vaccine to immunize all the children of the world against polio is $120 million. The Polio Plus fundraising timetable provides for intensive fundraising to be completed during the Rotary year 1987-88, culminating in a victory celebration at the International Convention in June 1988. In all, the campaign covers 2 years. The first year is coming to an end. National multinational coordinators have been appointed at all levels, and committees have been formed. Training seminars have been conducted. Major donors who could potentially contribute more than $25,000 have been identified and contacted with great success. A major gift was made by W. Clement Stone, insurance executive and philanthropist from the city of Chicago. He and his wife Jessie contributed $1 million. Les Whitcroft of the Rotary Club of Ryde, Australia, and his wife Shirley gave a gift of $250,000 to the Polio Plus campaign. The Whitcrofts have experienced the tragedy of polio in their own lives.
37 years ago, I was struck down by polio, and I spent nearly 2 years in bed.
At the 1986 Pacific Southwest Regional Conference in Adelaide, Australia, Shirley presented Rotary International with the first major gift to the Polio Plus campaign.
Sir, it is not in my nature or my husband's to seek any recognition, but we have made this public announcement in the hope that others will give considerable consideration to accepting this opportunity to help immunize the children of the world. Thank you.
Les and Shirley asked that their gift be used in the Philippines, a country plagued by hundreds of polio cases a year. A $1.235 million contribution was received from the Canadian International Development Agency, and the government of the United Kingdom donated £1 million, equal to about $1.6 million. Also, during this first year, clubs have been notified of their respective shares of the Polio Plus goal, and with the advice of their area coordinators, have established their own fundraising goals. Model Rotary clubs have been designated in different areas of the U.S. to test the campaign plan. Walter Maddox, Polio Plus campaign executive director, talks to the board of the Rotary Club of Rochelle, a model club located not far from the Rotary International Secretariat in Evanston.
Well, President Leonard, they tell me congratulations are in order. I gather you're writing the name of the Rotary Club of Rochelle, Illinois in big bright letters over the Polio Plus campaign. Let's see, your share was, what was it, $7,600, wasn't it?
That's correct.
And you set a goal of $62,500. How did you come to exceed your goal? What have you done?
Well, first, a lot of work.
Yeah?
But our committee meets regularly, started off at the beginning, meeting every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock. So our committee kept on top of things and had regular meetings. Then we tried to press proportionate, meaningful gifts. This wasn't a Boy Scout drive. We had to have meaningful gifts, and it took a little while to get that idea across to the club members.
Yeah.
And to do this, we started having meetings in our home, very informal meetings with 3 or 4 couples. We invited the wives also to our home. And at these meetings, we talk about our children, we talk about Rotary, but mostly we talked about Polio Plus. And to make it a little easier, we used the VCR tape, Polio Plus, that we showed. And this way, the question and answers, and we had just laid a lot of good groundwork for our future solicitations. No solicitations were done at these meetings.
Okay, good.
And we ended them up with some of Marge's good homemade rhubarb pie and ice cream. And then we followed this up with a 2-on-1 presentation to the individual member later, at which time he was presented with what we thought was a fair share for him to give. It worked very well.
That's great. And how much have you raised actually so far?
Actually, so far, we're in the close to $70,000.
I can't tell you how pleased I am to hear you say that. Let me tell you why. Because we've been saying follow the plan. We've been saying it's important to follow the plan, and we've been telling clubs, we know that if you follow the plan, you'll succeed. And here you are in Rochelle, Illinois, living proof that following the plan succeeds. And I think that's terribly important. It is to me anyway. Hope it is to you.
I know our next step is to approach non-Rotarians, Walter, but just how are we going to do that? Can you give us some help on that?
Well, I think you've done the first thing right, and that is in setting your goals, take into account the fact that you're going to solicit non-Rotarians. And I was pleased that you hadn't set too high a goal for that part of your campaign. There are many ways of doing it, but I think you're right. You've got to do some cultivation first of all. And what many clubs are going to be doing is a real cultivation visit. Last Tuesday, I think it was, the Rotary Club of Clearwater, Florida, held exactly such a cultivation visit. They had a party in one of the local hotels, a cocktail party, for about 60 leading businessmen. And they showed the videos about Polio Plus. They talked about Polio Plus. I think it's important there's no solicitation at that point.
We went over to a place called Madras, state of Madras in India, and immunized 3.5 million children. What does that mean if we hadn't immunized these 3.5 million children? He says, well, more than 10% would have either, the fortunate ones would have died, the remainder would have been blind, maimed, or just so badly crippled.
And then I think the important thing is this. You must do your solicitations quickly after that. Whilst the memory of what you told them is still in their minds, whilst they still realize the horror of polio and the immense good that we're going to do in the world, then I think you must solicit them very quickly.
Walter, there are major donors that have given tremendous sums of money to this project. Is there some special way that they could be recognized, or is it a good idea to do that? And if so, how could they be recognized?
Yeah, we think it's essential that everybody who gives to this campaign in a meaningful way gets some sort of recognition. And so Grant Wilkins, who's a past district governor, got a lady artist called Glenna Goodacre. And Glenna has a superb talent to portray children. And we asked her whether she'd be willing to do something for the campaign. And entirely free of charge, she's given to us a concept. And at the moment we have it in a clay model and in a 9-inch bronze model. And it's a statue of a Rotarian sitting on a packing case. And in his arms he has a little Asian child, and he's giving the 2 drops of vaccine to her. And down by his knee here are an African child and obviously European type child or American type child. And these 2 children are looking up into his eyes with absolute wonderment. And the other element of recognition that we've got is for any donor of $100,000 or more, they have the opportunity, if they would go to an immunization site where a National Day of Immunization is being held. Les Whitcroft, who's the chairman of the Australian Polio Plus campaign committee, gave the first major gift to the campaign. And he and his wife Shirley went to the Philippines and took part in an immunization day there. And they both say it was a really meaningful and unforgettable experience to actually take part in immunizing the children in one of these campaigns. Wonderful experience for them, and they still talk about it an awful lot.
Let me hold you, sweetheart, I will love you. Let me hear you whisper that you love me too.
Well, realize, if you will, Leonard, that you're not the typical club. You're a model club, and because of that, you've been running your campaign ahead of the rest of the country and the rest of the world, in fact. But the rest of the world will start to catch up in about October of 1987, when we suggest that the campaign starts in the clubs about end of September or the beginning of October of 1987.
Excuse me, Walter, but do we have to wait until next fall to get started? Could we get started sooner, like right now?
A lot of people ask that, and yes, I suppose many clubs want to get started right now, but it would be a mistake. It would be a mistake, I think, because we've got the International Convention ahead of us, and we want to make sure that everybody's in the club when this personal solicitation starts. After the convention, you've got the vacation season. Yep. And we want all clubs to follow the plan and to follow the phases of the plan carefully. We think there's a lot to be gained by all clubs doing the same thing at the same time. Our plan is that starting at the end of September or the beginning of October, for something like 16 weeks, the clubs will run the campaign in the club, personal solicitations of Rotarians, beginning with the major gifts, then the advanced gifts, and then the special gifts. And then in January, the rest of the clubs will be where you are now, ready to go out into the community and solicit gifts from individuals, non-Rotarian individuals in the community. That, we think, will probably take 6 or 7 weeks. So at that time, the personal solicitation part of the campaign will be over. And then we would recommend, and we hope that clubs will run some of the typical and traditional community-based fundraising activities that Rotarians do so very, very well.
Walter, what suggestions do you have for us with respect to public fundraising?
Oh, I think the sort of thing that Rotary clubs always do. Rotary clubs seem to be full of imagination about this sort of thing. There are a million different ways of raising funds publicly, and there's a Rotarian out there who knows every single one of them. But some clubs have done a number of things. Golf tournaments seem to be a very good idea, very popular, and they work. Rotarians seem to play golf, or they've got friends who do. I'll tell you one, a very, very clever one that I'd never heard before. In Hilton Head, there's a Rotarian who's a builder, and he got some of his builder friends together, and they've built a house. An actual house that's worth in excess of $250,000. And they gave it as the final prize in a bingo tournament just a few weeks ago. Enormous success, raised a tremendous amount of money. I'd never heard it before, I thought it was great. 2 traditional ones, but ones that are doing specifically well at the moment. 2 cookbooks. District 220 in Spain, I think, A lady there did a cookbook that was immensely successful, who raised 2 million pesetas. I'm not sure what that is in dollars, but raised 2 million pesetas. And they're just publishing the second edition now. And there's a lady in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who I saw at the assembly in Nashville, and she was talking about doing a cookbook. And, you know, my thought was, fine, cookbooks are okay, they don't raise very much money. After the first 3 weeks, she had raised $70,000 net for Polio Plus.
With the typical enthusiasm and commitment of Rotarians, we have no doubt that we will succeed. Les Wright, chairman of the International Polio Plus Campaign Committee, reaffirmed his faith in the campaign at the International Assembly.
We're confident that we will have joyful cause to celebrate the commitment of Rotarians and a great victory for Polio Plus in Philadelphia. Indeed, I dare to believe that we will exceed our $120 million goal.
Chuck Keller, Rotary International President for 1987-88, communicates his enthusiasm to Rotarians at the International Assembly.
I look forward with great anticipation to this next year because I think it will be Rotary at its most glorious hour. And we will meet together, you and I, at the Philadelphia Convention, at the time when we announce and we proclaim to the world the success of Polio Plus, a program which is larger and bigger and better than anything we have ever tackled before, a program befitting Rotary. Thank you very much.